Hello, Texans, and welcome to the NFL Scouting Combine in Indianapolis. We are live. Mark Vandermeer, John Harris with you. And just a few minutes from now, Nick Caserio, general manager of the Texans, will address the media right here at the Scouting Combine. We're in a huge convention center here, Johnny, on what is called Radio Row, which is more than just radio. I hate to say just radio, but more than radio, a lot of digital media here. And at the far end of the convention center is press conference row. I'll call it that. You have a lot of different podiums.
Yeah, you have 8 different podiums. Players and prospects will be going up to all of those. There's 4 smaller podiums. Those are for the players. But the coaches and GMs that are here will go up to those probably about 200 yards from us from here. And then Nick Caserio will make his way over here eventually, and we'll get a chance to catch up with him. But I'm sure he'll be asked a few things. One about a certain quarterback, another one about the coaching staff. He'll be asked a number of things, so it'll be kind of interesting to hear from Nick. We had a chance to catch up with him last Wednesday, but we spent a lot of time talking about our Wednesday draft, knowing that we would get him today. So I'll be curious to see what he gets today, but I'd imagine first and foremost in everybody's minds what's going to happen with Deshaun Watson.
Well, this is must-see digital TV, right? Because Nick has done Zoom press conferences, obviously, with all the COVID protocols going on, but this is the first time in a while that the national media will be able to participate in a Nick Caserio press conference. So the Ian Rappaports, the Adam Schefters of the world, they're all here, Albert Breer, they're all here, and they will have a chance to ask Nick questions along with everybody else. By the way, we will have Nick Caserio exclusively tonight on Texans All Access on Sports Radio 610 at 6 o'clock, so you don't want to miss that. But you're going to see Nick in just a few moments talk to the media. You mentioned it, a lot of different questions. I think a big story as far as how it can impact the 2022 Texans and what they're building here with Lovie Smith. And by the way, we'll do this tomorrow with Lovie Smith live as well in about 24 hours, the head coach of the Texans right here at the NFL Scouting Combine in India. But the big story here, Johnny, I think, is the Texans having a first and second round draft choice for the first time, or only for the second time in the last 5 years. That is nice for this franchise to have that many draft choices to work with when you go through the entire rounds, 1 through 7. And then you look at undrafted free agents, whatever else they can get out of this class. There are a lot of athletes here that they can interview, they can examine literally with the medical evaluations, and also get to look at up close and personal as they work out.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing to come out of here, I was on a podcast last week, and they said, what are the few big things that have to come out of the combine? For the prospects, to me, it's interviews and medical. Well, what about the workouts? Hey, the workouts are important, and the workouts are fun. They're fun for TV. It's fun to watch these guys. It's fun for Rich Eisen and Daniel Jeremiah on TV to opine about these particular prospects and how they're running and how they look, etc. But for the NFL teams, give me that medical information, and we got 45 interviews they can do here. So let's sit down, 15 minutes I think those interviews are. Those 45 interviews are going to be big, especially for the underclassmen. If you think about an underclassman, take, for instance, Tyler Smith. Tyler Smith's one of my favorite prospects in this draft. He's a tackle from Tulsa. He was a third-year junior. There was some debate whether he was actually going to declare for the draft. He was one of the last names that went official, that he had actually declared for the draft, and that was January 17th, I believe. Because he's an underclassman, he didn't play at Senior Bowl. He's been working out. So if the scouts weren't talking to him during the year, and then they might have been aware of him, but they didn't have any interviews with him, this is the first time that any of these teams are going to have an opportunity to talk to a guy like Tyler Smith, and that's hugely important. You mean a guy, now you're only getting 15 minutes, but you get that opportunity in those 15 minutes, get those questions asked. Okay, we'd like to interview with that guy. Let's figure out our plan for how we want to talk about him. Do we want to bring him on campus? And I say on campus.
Texans
in our
campus.
building, Texans campus, and for one of the at-home 30 visits. Do we want to have one of those? Those things come out of these interviews. And sometimes you go the other way. And I remember in 2016, we asked Kevin Johnson this question. Kevin, did you have any idea the Texans were interested? He said no. He said, I talked to him at the Combine, one of the 45 interviews, and then they didn't talk to him again and kept it all under wraps and then made the call to draft Kevin Johnson. So
they knew what they knew.
Right, exactly. So those two things become very important for the prospects in the eyes of the NFL teams. How they work out, the scouts and the teams feel like they already know that.
Right.
So for Nick Caserio, he said it to us last Wednesday. It's about information. What you do with that information, that obviously is his biggest job. What you do with that information on draft night, who you decide to hone in on and who you draft, And like you said, first and second round picks, yay. Draft party, yay. Second round picks, yay. I mean, to have those picks when you look at what Nick and the personnel staff did last year with the 5 picks they had last year, and to think, okay, we're going to tack on about 4 or 5 more picks, an additional third rounder. We're going to have first and second round picks.
And who knows what else comes up with trade possibilities.
Absolutely. So you got all that going for you starting this draft. The one thing that stood out to me, Mark, in just kind of canvassing the room, if you will, and ironically the Chicago Bears are to our left, is the thought of everybody's thought about Lovie Smith. Now, we'll meet with Lovie. We'll do the same thing for Lovie tomorrow.
The love
but
for Lovie is strong.
It's just really strong. And we've talked to a lot of people. We saw Jeff Joniak this morning, who's the voice of the Bears, and just said, you'll love Lovie. I mean, that's kind of been the universal thought that we've heard from so many people. That's been exciting to hear. We knew it, and we've known it because we've been in the building for a year with him, but it's been kind of encouraging to hear that from the different people we've talked to.
It's more third-party validation of Lovie being the head coach of this team, and it's just, well, he had 11 years total as an NFL head coach, his 12th year coaching in the National Football League as a head coach. Now, another thing about the Combine, as the workouts will get started in a couple of days, Gary Kubiak once told me it's not just the guys working out what they do in these workouts, because that's probably not going to tip the scales either way as to whether you're going to take a certain guy unless something ridiculous happens on either side of the spectrum. But he liked to watch how the players interacted with each other, because it's not like those guys are your teammates. You're competing with them. But what happens when you have a 90-man roster, John? Not everybody makes the team. They are your teammates, yet you're competing with them. So how you interact with others, how that goes down, who are the alphas in the group? Now, he never said that to me, but I'm looking at that sort of thing. I remember in 2014, big quarterback draft, right? And for our franchise, we thought, well, maybe the Texans take a quarterback in that draft. They did. It was Tom Savage later on in the 4th round, but we were wondering, would there be a first-round QB taken? Well, yeah, Johnny Manziel in that class, and Blake Bortles and Teddy Bridgewater and all these quarterbacks, and how they interacted with each other in the workout. I was paying specific attention to that. So I'm sure that those kinds of things come up as they evaluate players, as Nick gets a chance to look at some of these guys, and Lovie Smith as well. And the other thing, John, and I know you're getting questions about this because we interview people from around the league, media from around the league, they interview us. I'm getting questions about how are they going to work together. And I think that they've been very clear. Lovie Smith and Nick Caserio. I mean, Lovie did a Zoom call for the season ticket members, and it was great. We were having a great time on it, taking questions from season ticket members. And then all of a sudden, Nick Caserio's in his office, and Nick does a cameo on Lovie's Zoom call for the season ticket members. And by the way, we're waiting for Nick Caserio's press conference. John and I are the warm-up band for Nick Caserio. Anyway, Nick Caserio jumped on the Lovie Smith Zoom call, and it was terrific, and you could see the chemistry between them right there and how they're working hard building the 2022 Texans and beyond, and it's off to a very good start right now, which is all you can say for right now. They haven't selected any players yet, no free agency yet, and that's another thing. Between now and the draft, and this is all about the draft here tonight or today, this event here, the Combine as it goes through Sunday, but you have free agency starting up within a couple of weeks.
To that point about the free agency, we were at dinner last night, and as we were leaving, I looked over and I saw a general manager. And then I saw a guy sitting across from him, and I was like, I think I know who that is. And it was an agent sitting there having a dinner. Now,
not talking any football, of course.
None at all.
Just talking about the appetizer quality.
Who knows what they were talking about, but it was just interesting to see.
It wasn't our general manager, by the way. It was another general manager.
No, not at all. But to your point, Gary Kubiak's point about watching the interaction of the players, it's really interesting. They said that this was 2016, I believe it was. 2016, 2017. I was on the side where the offensive linemen were all grouped together, and they were getting ready to get split up into the vertical jump and the broad jump. And they had 2 groups. There was one doing 40s, then vert, and then broad jump. So I'm watching, and there's one offensive lineman kind of like sitting on the bench, like taking his warm-ups off, getting ready as they're describing the drills. And I'm watching, and I'm kind of like, and I realize it's a first-round type guy. Probably going to go high in the first round, offensive tackle. And he explained the drill. This guy's just sitting on the bench. So comes time to do the drill, And guess who messes up the drill twice in a row?
Oh,
That guy. And I just remember thinking,
where did he get drafted?
he ended up going late in the first round, but he was supposed to go in the top 10. So he went late in the first round. Now,
That could have been a scale tipper.
I mean, it was.
Never know.
Now, that guy ended up panning out because he got his act together. But it was one of the things that sort of followed him from the time he was in college and through his early years in the NFL, and light switch went on, and he ended up getting a second contract to being a pretty good player. But the fact was, he should have been drafted in the top 10. But I'm sitting there watching the interaction, and then when he had messed up the drill and they're trying to explain to him, he just was like, man. And it's those things that you do pick up on. And Matt Taylor of the Colts asked me, when you come to the combine, what are some of the things, some things you look for? And I said, I like to listen. I like to listen to guys.
To the press
if
conferences.
they're always going, I.
Right.
But if I hear a guy go up there and say, well, we did this year. We had a really good year. This is a really good year
tough,
for
though,
our
because
team.
they're asked about themselves a lot.
I know.
It's
But
hard not to say I.
Right. But the guys that do, keep an eye on them. They get the big picture. And so I always say that listening to them, the players will tell you. You just have to be able to pick up on it. And so I think that's kind of interesting from our standpoint. Who wins the press conference? A few years ago, you said a certain quarterback had won a press conference, and he did.
But he didn't pan out to be the best quarterback.
No, he did not pan out to be the best quarterback. So sometimes that happens as well. But there's a lot of action that goes on. I wish we were flies on the wall with everything that could go on, and I wish we had 48 hours in a day so we could kind of take it all in.
But you can be a fly on the wall, because on this very platform here that you're watching, eventually you'll be able to see a day in the life with Nick Caserio as Tyler Sutterth, our lead video producer, is following him around and getting a feel for what it's like to be the GM here at the Combine, and he'll do the same thing with Lovie Smith. So that'll be very cool to watch. That's coming up soon enough. We'll put it together for you. But just to give you a perspective here, like we said, we're at a huge convention center here. It's attached to Lucas Oil Stadium, which is attached to everything else in town, as everything is attached here. Great place for the Combine. And we're on Radio Row. We have the bench press area off to our left with seats. And look, if they had that bubble plan, I don't think we would have seen this bench press area here. So that's kind of nice. We'll get to see some of that activity right in front of us, and a lot of stuff going on in the bowl of Lucas Oil Stadium, of course. And press conference row is a lot of different podium setups and everything. You've probably seen some of it on TV already, but digital TV coming your way in just a few moments. Nick Caserio to meet with the media and talk about what the Texans are doing here to try to get better, and maybe some stuff about some acquisition plans. I'm sure Nick will probably not reveal anything specific about that. But there will be a lot of acquisitions, Johnny, because they had a lot of players on one-year deals this past season. And I get asked a lot about that. I mean, when you talk about over 50 players brought in on that 90-man roster and then over 30 new ones on the 53-man roster, look, expect something not exactly similar as Nick Caserio is making his way to the podium right now, but expect a whole lot of changes coming into 2022. And those draft choices, you mentioned it, they seem to hit on five. At least all five did something. Nick Caserio at the podium, and let's go up there in just a moment here as he meets with the media.
So welcome, good afternoon. I know this is kind of funny, but it's actually my first time behind the podium after being in the league 20 some odd years. So I know Phil Perry's smiling over there. Before we kind of get started on football, I just want to kind of take it away from football for a minute and just have some reflection and just perspective about some of the things that are going on in the world, some of the things that are happening in Eastern Europe. I think it kind of puts in perspective kind of what we're doing here. Like, this is important, but it's really not important. So I think thoughts and prayers to the people of Ukraine and some of the things that they're dealing with. I think we kind of lose sight of kind of what goes on in the real world when we're worried about football and testing and combine and people running. So I just think it's appropriate to kind of take a few minutes and just reflect on that and just realize that our thoughts and prayers are with the folks there. I think there's been, 500,000 people that have left Ukraine, the refugees. So, again, like what we're doing, like it matters, but it really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. So, we're excited to be here. Good opportunity for, I would say, our organization to kind of start our planning process here a little bit for the off season. It's been a couple weeks with the new coaching staff in place with Coach Smith, hired Lovie a couple weeks ago. Have some experience with him, obviously being in the system and the program for a year. And then I would say this week is really about information. It's trying to get organized. I think players. There are going to be some players that work out. There's going to be some players that do certain things. I think it's about what you take out of this week. You can get as much done as you need to, and not get caught up in the things that aren't happening, and who's working out, who's not working out. So I think we're excited about the opportunity to continue to build the team. A lot of change has taken place, I'd say, organizationally over the last, call it 12 months. It's hard to believe it's been a year or so they've been on the job. We did some decent things as a team last year. Had a lot of new players. Have a number of players that will be free agents this year. So we'll be busy in the offseason here, kind of rebuilding the team. But looking forward to free agency and looking forward to some opportunities there in the draft, once we kind of get started. So appreciate everybody being here. Brooks, go ahead.
You mentioned that you're open for business with a number of your players. What do you think of the market right now for that pick and the situation with quarterback and other positions, and what things in this week that you look for that might dictate whether you move?
Sure. Yeah, it's pretty early in the process, I would say, more than anything. I mean, you kind of know who's picking where right now. Nothing changes. I think, speaking specifically to this week, I don't think there's anything that happens or takes place here relative to what players do on or off the field, or what happens in a 20-minute interview is going to change, what your philosophy on moving back or making trades or those types of things. So I think the most important thing for us is to kind of know as many players as possible. I'd say we're relative to last season. We're in a little different position relative to, we kind of eliminated, call it 55, 60 players last year, right, that we knew we weren't going to have access to. So now I'd say the pool of players is a little bit wider. So just trying to get as much information. I'd say that the group that probably is most pressing are the underclassmen, because this is really the first opportunity to spend extensively with them kind of face-to-face. A lot of them weren't at an all-star game. So I would say you're kind of in the infantile stages. As far as when trades or movement and those types of things take place, those are things as you get a little bit closer to the draft. You having dialogue or discussions with other teams about that probably, doesn't make that much sense. But philosophically, in terms of team building, the people that have followed us, we're pretty open-minded. We're pretty flexible, whatever means necessary. So whether it's trade, whether it's move back in the draft, whether it's move up, whether it's trade with another team in the league, whether it's whatever it is, we're going to explore all avenues. Go ahead, Aaron. Yeah, I'd say generally speaking, we saw some progress from the rookies, not just Davis, but I'd say Nico, kind of as the year progressed. Garrett Wall had an opportunity to play a little bit later in the year. The one guy that played the most snaps or was the most consistent from beginning to end was Roy Lopez, when he was picked in the 6th round or something like that, whatever it was. So I think the big thing, you're just looking for some level of improvement and progress from year 1 to year 2. We've had about, 25, 30 players that have been in NRG over the last, 2 to 3 weeks. So they're hungry, they're excited for the off season. So they're kind of starting their training regimen. So they're kind of turning the page to next season. So I think the biggest thing is kind of taking advantage of their opportunities between now and the start of OTAs. Our off-season program will start, I think it's going to start April 11th-ish, something like that. So we got a couple weeks early relative to maybe some of the other folks. So just try to be smart, and just hopefully those guys can see the gains they made during the season and hopefully continue to build on the things they did, last season. Go ahead, Vince. Yeah, great question. I'd say philosophically, in terms of players, like competitiveness, toughness, I would say consistency and grit, and a certain level of football aptitude or intelligence. So when you have a one-on-one conversation, those are some of the things you might be able to glean. The way we're set up is, try to steer towards football as much as possible. So let them kind of teach us what they know, because everybody's baseline of understanding what they were asked to do is different. What one receiver is asked to do at one place is different than another receiver. And when you're just watching them play, you don't really have an understanding of what they're asked to do. So you just try to ascertain some of that information, try to get a baseline understanding. The reality is the baseline of where they're starting when they walk in our building is pretty low. So then it's going to be a matter of how quickly are they going to be able to make progress and learn. Everybody has different stages of learning that they're going to go through. So you really don't want to jump to judgment too quickly about, okay, a 20-minute conversation and say, we're going to eliminate it, made a bad impression. Okay, let's do a deeper dive. Maybe there's something that we have to find out a little bit more as we go. But I'd say some of the intangible elements, what we look for in players, in terms of what we want in the building on a day-to-day basis, like those are the things that are going to be important to us. Sure, number of players at that position that are going to be free agents, guys that made contributions for us last year. We were able to re-sign Rex at the end of the year, kind of extend him into this season. I'd say Rex's role grew as the year progressed, probably more out of need more than anything else. But that's probably a position that, we'll evaluate as we go. We only have 3 players under contract currently. Rex is 1, Scotty Phillips, and then Darius Anderson, who kind of signed, as a reserve future player there after the season. So that's probably a position that we'll kind of evaluate here, during the off season, how we build it out. I mean, I think it's, yet to be determined.
Nick, how does
Go ahead, Aaron.
a more normal college football season in 2021 affect how you approach the later rounds of the draft or the undrafted pool of guys? Obviously, last year you traded up out of the 6th and 7th.
Sure. We had ended up with 5 draft picks and then 6 or 7 undrafted players that we signed after the draft. So as you look at where we are roster-wise currently, I think we have 47, 48 players that are on the roster. So to go from 50 to 90, we're probably not going to do it all in free agency. And then we have, call it 9 draft picks right now, and then there's probably more of an opportunity for some of the undrafted players after the draft. But I would say we probably spend as much time on that group of players. We have a grade that's commensurate with that round or being post-draft. You really have an opportunity to really identify some of the players that maybe you want in your program that maybe aren't going to get drafted. And there's different ways to get players on your team. And I would say spending as much time on that group of players, knowing that group, is just as important as knowing the top 50 players in the draft. So, again, it really speaks to more of a comprehensive deep dive of knowing the overall board. Like, there's however many players get drafted, 200, almost 300. And then there's going to be another large group of players that are signed after the draft. So you don't want to kind of cast that group aside. But, we were fortunate going back to our time in New England and even going back to Roy last year. Those players are going to be an important part of your team because there's a certain cost associated with that. So you have to be able to build kind of your team out. You can't pay every player X number of dollars, so you kind of have to spread the cost out and asset allocation, as best as possible. Go ahead here, right here in the front. Yeah, I would say that situation, we've talked about this with our group. I mean, we're day to day, in terms of handling that. So once the information becomes more relevant or prevalent, then, we'll handle it accordingly. I mean, my philosophy from the beginning has always been to do the right thing by the Houston Texans organization, and we're going to continue to do that here, moving forward. Yeah, I think the only strain is the discussion that you all have had about. You guys have probably spent more time on it than we have. I think once the season, started, our focus, going back to last season, was kind of on our team and just preparing on a week-to-week basis. So try to control the things that we can control. I'd say our players did an awesome job of focusing week to week on just the task in front of them, which is getting ready for the opponent. So we've kind of transitioned into kind of the 2022 season. So we're excited about Lovey, and the staff that he's put in place. So again, we're going to take it one day at a time, control the things that we can control, and just try to do as good a job as possible starting to put together the team, for next season.
Nick, when you kind of look right now,
Right here in front.
Nick, when you kind of look at what Lovey and Pep both said about making it a more running-centric offense next year, they want to run a little bit more 12 personnel. Tim said that this offense was going to be a little bit tight end friendly. What have you seen from the tight ends in this group, and also ones in free agency? How do you go about the longer round?
Yeah, it's a little bit similar to the running back discussion we just had. A number of those players are free agents. The only player under contract, the tight end, is Brevin. We had an opportunity to kind of play there a little bit. So that's a position that, we're certainly going to evaluate. So I think really what you're trying to do is when you're in 12 personnel, you're trying to make a determination of what the defense is going to do and how you want to play. So when you look at the league, what's happened, teams have to make a decision about what they do against 12 personnel. They want to put base defense on the field. They want to play with nickel defense. If you put nickel defense on the field, maybe you can create some matchups in a running game. So a lot of the running game is a product of who you have kind of end the line of scrimmage, and the offensive line is a part of that as well. And it's a function of what's going on the other side of the ball as well. So I would say similar to the running back discussion, that's probably a market that we're going to evaluate and just try to figure out, who makes the most sense for our team here. Again, we only have one player on the team right now, so I would expect there to be some new faces on the team here, at some point. Right here in the middle. Yeah, Matt's he's had a unique, I'd say, background. I'd say my first recollection of Matt was the year Chris Long actually came out in the draft. And at the time, I think Matt was either helping, Al, or Al was at University of Virginia at the time. So we actually flew in to work Chris out that morning, and Matt picked us up at the airport and drove us to the workout. So that was kind of my first introduction to Matt. But to make the transition and leap from his legal background, which he obviously had a career and certain aspirations, to kind of transition into football, I'd say it's, fairly, rare, but he wasn't opposed to kind of starting. He started in the same role that I started in when I was, in New England in 2001 as a scouting assistant. So Matt's really smart. He works hard. He has a good grasp of players. He has a good understanding of football. He's been around football a long time, whether it was his dad or his brother Mike. So he's been around the game. And his growth and development is really a credit to his work ethic and, his thoughtfulness and his intelligence. And I think a lot of people in the building in New England have a lot of confidence in Matt and what he's capable of doing. So, really happy for him and the opportunity he has in front of him. There's still a lot of great people in that building that, I'm close with. Matt's one of them. Cam Williams is another one. He kind of started in the scouting assistant role, has taken on some more responsibility. So there's a fair amount of us that have left, but, there's still some pretty good ones there. So excited for the opportunity that Matt has in front of him for sure. Go ahead, Phil, and then right here. Yeah, it's a good question. I think you might be looking for some of the similar traits and characteristics, maybe going back to Vanessa's question in terms of the intangibles. But then you have to look at, what are some of the things that you're doing offensively, defensively, in the kicking game? So like what Pat is looking for defensively, are those the same things that we might be looking for in the same players in Lovey's system? It may or may not. So I would say the traits that are important to you in terms of the overall makeup, in terms of the football characteristics, non-physical related, those are the things that, we're going to value, how you value players, how you grade players, the system that you use to arrive at that endpoint. There's probably some similarities, but in the end, there's 32 different buildings, 32 different ways of building their team. So they're going to do the things that they feel make the most sense for their team. We're going to do the same thing on our end. I would say the one thing it does, it certainly opens some dialogue up to having discussions, whether it's about a player, whether it's about a trade. Like, who you're dealing with on the under end of it. There's a relationship there. So which I would say football in the end is a relationship business. So the more relationships that you can create over the course of time, whether it's in one building, then they relocate to another building. So it gives you an opportunity to maybe have some dialogue and discussion, with some other teams and folks maybe that you didn't have as much contact previously.
Everyone, we've got time for two more questions. Two more.
The Raiders just hired Dave Ziegler as a new GM. I know you have a long history with him, going back to John Carroll. What do you thought about him as an individual?
Yeah, there's a lot of us John Carroll folk that are out there. I think he'll do an awesome job. My relationship with Dave and Josh goes back a long way. I've known Josh since 1995, and then Dave came into John Carroll since 1996. Both were great people. They were great players. They've both been really successful in this league to this point. I would say Dave is, very smart. He's got a very wide-ranging background, a lot of diversity in terms of his experience. So whether it's working in Denver, Josh was there. He worked at Iona. He's worked a number of different jobs. He's taught. He's coached high school. So I think his ability to kind of connect with people and kind of see things through a different lens is something that's unique to Dave. Always academically did very well. I think he was an academic All-American at John Carroll. So kind of speaks to his intelligence, speaks to his work ethic. So I think their relationship, anytime you start a new program, from the ground up, when you have two people that kind of speak the same language, I think it's going to be beneficial to everybody involved. So I'm rooting for him. I'm excited for him. I'm happy that both of them had the opportunity. They've earned it and they deserve it.
We've got time for one last.
Go ahead, Brooks.
Where do you evaluate your cap situation right now and how it influences, and also your time in New England? What did you learn about, the value placement on certain players? How's that helping the overall process?
Yeah, I'd say cap-wise, we're in a little bit better situation than we were kind of start of last off season. So I think we're honestly middle of the league right now. That's before we do anything. So you can create cap space, married different ways. So you want to have a manageable amount. I'd say your cap situation is also going to dictate kind of the pool of players that you're going to maybe have an opportunity to add to your roster, during free agency. But I'd say philosophically, our belief is value the player commensurate with the role, and you try to match those up. So, okay, the role is X. Okay, that role is worth X number of value, is worth this. Okay, if the value of the player goes beyond what the role is, then you have to make a determination. All right, is it worth pursuing that player? Or you know what? We're going to have to let him go and try to find somebody else that maybe fits the role that we have in mind. So I would say kind of looking at the economics and, being fiscally responsible is certainly something that has always been a big part of something that I believe in. It doesn't preclude you from, signing somebody that maybe is going to be cost prohibitive, but it's going to come at the expense of maybe X number of players. So you just have to be thoughtful of the ramifications it has on the overall team, not specific to the one player. All right.
One, Josina Anderson, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, great question. I would say just personally speaking, I have a lot of respect and admiration for Brian. I think he's one of the better coaches in our league. We had a lot of time together there in New England. Ultimately, as we went through kind of the hiring process and hiring cycle, like my responsibility to the organization and to ownership, was to make the decision I felt was in our best interest. So, Brian was certainly a part of that process. Brian's a great coach. I know he'll do a lot of good things, with the Steelers, I'm sure, and he'll be in this league for a long time. But ultimately, in the end, we just felt that Lovie made the most sense for our team and situation at that time. Yeah, ultimately, Cal kind of put it on my shoulders to kind of, make the decision I felt was best and to bring candidates to the table. So, Cal was very, I would say, supportive and open, and certainly put a lot of stock in the things that I had to say. All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.